10th, 2024. And again, just want to welcome everybody to the Audit Committee meeting. Thank everybody for attending today, and I'll just extend a happy holidays, an early happy holidays for everybody. So item 2 is the roll call.
Okay, calling roll. Michael Abuzerall.
Here.
Trevor McLear.
Here.
Keith Libman.
Here.
Katie Gallagher.
Here.
And Michael Chambers.
Here.
Okay.
So item 3, public comment. Anybody from the public? Okay,
No.
Thank you. So 4, we need a motion to approve the minutes for the September 5th, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
Second. So all in favor of approving the minutes from September 5th, 2024, say aye. Aye. Okay, perfect. So member appointment. So I think everybody knows today is my last meeting being on the audit committee. ASAP, being on the audit committee. So we do have a better replacement for me as I rotate off the audit committee. This is Richard Molina. So you want to just introduce yourself? And
Good morning. I think I've met some.
Speaking to the microphone. Thank you. I had to turn it on there. It should be a button.
Good morning. I've met some of you. My name is Rich Molina. I am currently at Cleveland State. I teach accounting. I'm a CIA, CPA attorney. I've been at Cleveland State full-time since 2010. Prior to that, I was general tax counsel at Marathon Oil, which is no more. It was just absorbed by Conoco about 3 weeks ago. I'm a native of Cuyahoga County, lived there until I went away to school, lived in Texas for 20 years. After retiring, I wanted to move back to Cuyahoga County, so I currently reside in Westlake. So, thank you.
so slightly more qualified than me. So do we want to introduce ourselves to? You want to do that at the next meeting? Okay, so we'll just do that. So Mike Abuzerall, the outgoing chair of the audit committee. So I've worked in just many different areas in government over my entire career. I was smart enough to retire about 7 years ago, although I took on this darn part-time job that's driving me crazy. So it's keeping me active. So I'm gonna go.
I'm Keith Libman, spent my career in public accounting, largely on the audit and consulting side. I've had a sort of secondary career of involvement in nonprofit and civic organizations. Been on the Cuyahoga County Audit Committee now, I'm going to say 5 years-ish. Time flies. Welcome.
Mike Chambers, fiscal officer, off and on about 40 years with the county. Started as a summer intern, worked my way up to CFO. Had a couple years at Cleveland, and then I came back again for the last 20 or so years.
Hi, Katie Gallagher. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations and Innovation. That means I oversee fiscal, Chambers here, HR, IT, and innovation and performance. Prior to coming here with Chris Ronayne, I was the mayor of Brooklyn.
Good morning. I'm Mark Mustin. I'm from the prosecutor's office. I'm assigned by Michael C. O'Malley as the counsel to the audit committee.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Schneider, Senior Internal Audit with the Internal Audit Department, and I've been with the county for about 6.5 years. I'm a CPA. I worked in public accounting, tax, books, but I found my passion in audit and government. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Rich. Corey Swayzgood, Director of Internal Audit. Been here for 6 months, but prior to that, I was here for 5 or 6.5 years prior to 2020.
Joshua Wald, I'm the audit manager of the department. I've been here since late 2020. Before that, I spent about 8 or 9 years with the city of Cleveland in a similar role.
Welcome. My name is Sal Talarico. I've been in the committee. Keith, you said 5 years, but you've been in longer than I have.
Well,
Yeah.
get older, the memory.
I'm thinking me 5 years, yeah. I was with the city of Oberlin. I retired there at the end of August. I was there as their finance director for 21 years, and then I was with the city of Parma before that, and then in the private sector before that. I have an accounting degree, of course, and I think I've been on the committee around 5 years or so. So, welcome.
Good morning, Rich. My name is Trevor McLear. I serve on behalf of the council president on the audit committee. Worked with Mike here since early day one on the audit committee. I've worked at the county for about going on 21 years. Welcome.
Okay. So I'd like to just say a couple of words, if I may, before we get on to the meat of the agenda. So I've been actually recruited, Rich, about, I don't know how many years ago that we first reached out about trying to get you on the audit committee. So again, I think you'd be a great addition to the work that we're doing, and thanks for willing to do that. So for me personally, I mean, it's been 10 wonderful, and sometimes challenging years, but they've all been fulfilling being on the audit committee. And I did just want to thank the current county executive and prior county executives for their confidence in recommending me for the position, and ultimately to the county council for approving the appointment. So the citizens of Cuyahoga County, I mean, they do expect there to be kind of a professional, engaged audit committee that's actually fulfilling the important role that the charter says that we should be fulfilling on behalf of the citizens of Cuyahoga County. And I think we have done that in the last 10 years, at least I think we've done that. Similarly, they expect a professional and kind of well-run internal audit department. And I think we have done that over the years, and I certainly think the current leadership within the internal audit department is the right leadership here for the county. So I just want to kind of extend my thanks to everybody, extend my thanks to the entire internal audit department for putting up with me over all these years, and for the opportunity to work with folks on the audit committee for all these years. So continue to do the great work that you're doing. I hope when your terms are up, you'll consider being reappointed, because I do think that this is the right makeup for the audit committee moving forward. So with that being said, I want to kind of come back onto the agenda. So item 6, the executive session, we're going to move that to 11:30. So we will have a hard stop at 11:30 for the executive session. Item 7A, the follow-up items in the third quarter meeting. So Corey, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. The follow-up items are attached. I'll throw them up here too on the screen. Are included in attachment A-7.A. So I'm not going to go through all of the follow-up items in detail. I have been providing that monthly status report that I try to a little bit more timely update the committee on those follow-up items. So I'll run through these briefly. If anyone has any questions for me, feel free to interrupt. The first follow-up item, this is a change that we made last meeting. I'm just including as the first follow-up item any items that are on the agenda. So the grant management update, the charter revisions to the Cuyahoga County Charter and Audit Committee Charter, and 2024 goals. Those are all agenda items that we'll be going over. Follow-up item number 2, this is the HR employee payroll review with the Agency of Inspector General's office. I've been talking to and had some discussions with IG Beeler, and I am pretty confident that the IG's is able to address any significant risks in the payroll process and their data analytic program. There are still some gaps that, as you see in our audit plan, that we do want to try to identify with payroll continuous monitoring that we'll be exploring this over this next year. But as far as the review that I had with Alexa Beeler and her staff on their data analytics program, I believe that they are addressing significant risks in the payroll process as of today. Item number 3, the update to council. I did present the update to council to the Council Operations Committee on November 19th. I thought that presentation went well. There were a few questions from County Council. One of them was a follow-up item that was requested from Councilwoman Simon. I did provide that item to the council committee members, and I did include it in the monthly update status report on Friday that I sent out to the committee. Councilwoman Simon did ask about our 76 auditable units. How many of those have not been audited since inception of the Department of Internal Audit? For anyone that doesn't know, internal audit was fully staffed in 2012. So since then, out of the 76 auditable units identified, approximately 16 of them have not been reviewed or audited by internal audit. There are some of them on our current audit plan that will be included for 2025 that I'll go over later.
Corey, for the most part, is the fact that those 16 have not been audited having to do with their risk profile not warranting it, or are there some where there have been other considerations?
Mr. Libman, that's correct. It's the risk profile. They've all been historically lower risks. So especially starting off as an internal audit department, trying to identify the higher risk units and testing those early on has been more the priority of the department over the last 10 years or so. So that would be the reason.
Great, thanks.
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Any other questions for Corey on the follow-up items? All right. So item 7B, the grants audit. So just as a couple of words from me on this one is the internal audit did an audit report and released the audit report, I guess maybe a number of months ago, and it did identify the need for the county to go through what I'm calling kind of just a grants cleanup. There were a lot of old expired grants that had either positive or negative cash balances in those grants. And so from a grant monitoring perspective, from a fiscal perspective, there's a lot of suggestions in the audit report about needing to clean that up. I know there's been great progress by the county on that. Neither Lee or Lennon are here, but you guys received a kind of a written update as to how they're progressing. So I don't know if you want to, is there any questions on that or any additional discussion on that? So it's a kind of a work in progress. I think they initially focused on the grants that had negative cash balances, which obviously would be the ones that are more risk to the county. And then from my recollection, they were focusing now on the positive ones that could have a positive financial implication as long as the grants were appropriately managed. So I think that's where they're at as far as the cleanup goes.
I'll just say I think they've made tremendous progress over the last 3 months since the last meeting. One of the bigger items that we've been following internally was the grants management policy and the federal policies that was approved by the Administrative Rules Board back in October. So that's been officially approved. I think they're still, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but still going through rolling out the policies and everything to the staff. But I think that was a huge accomplishment to get all that done over the last 3 months.
I do have a question. If a grant has a negative cash balance, then I guess by definition, more has been spent in fulfillment of the grant objective than the funds received from the granting organization. And so it's had to be covered by other funds of the county. Is part of this process that Lee is going through to identify whether proper authorization for that, I'll call it overspending, I'm not sure if that's the right term or not, that proper authorization has been given, or how does that work?
From my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I think there's a lot of different factors that go into that. From the presentations that Lee and Lennon gave last time, some of those negative balances could be from maybe the matching portion of the county, so that wasn't even reimbursed by the grant. So I know they've been going through for months or maybe even close to a year now and trying to figure out where those negative balances need to go to. And so far, there's been no impact to the general fund as far as the updates that I've seen, which is good.
Right, and I really think that the policy is going to help clarify that, because in the old days, someone left, someone new came in, they took over, repeated, and next thing you know, they left again, and the history has been lost in some of those things. I know there are a couple negative grants, I think, or balances with development that I think they're going to cover with some of their positive cash. So we are working one by one through them, but I think we've made a great progress, so.
I wouldn't call it not being authorized, though.
Yeah.
I think it was just the accounting of it being out of the
You wouldn't be able to
old
spend the
system.
money unless it was authorized. based on all the controls we have in place. It's, all like we said, the match wasn't maybe moved or was moved somewhere else.
I think the bigger risk is as a grant administrator, they budget for the appropriate amount of the grant, end up spending the money, but they don't draw the monies down. I think that's where the potential risk comes from when you have the transition of personnel. I do think a lot of the cleanup occurred because they found positive cash balances sitting over here in an accounting unit, but didn't appropriately apply it to where the expenses actually occurred. So the encouraging thing out of the email that Lee wrote up was that they've been able to pretty much resolve this issue without general fund implication, which I think is important for the county. Any other questions on the grants work?
Thing I'll say is the history of some of these go back a long ways, and that kind of was going through old famous documents that we don't have available anymore. So it's I think they've made great progress in what we can, so we'll keep updating.
And they are gonna plan a training next year for the fiscal staff on the grants policy. We just didn't really have time with the closeout this year to do it.
So now, I think that there was some discussion about hiring a person in the fiscal area to kind of oversee, at least from a fiscal perspective, the grants. I don't know if that's.
Fired that position a couple times, but they keep leaving, so we'll eventually get that done, yeah. There's a warehouse, but it's not as convenient as going into the old system and running the report. And really, the one person that can do that is pretty much Lennon. He's the keeper of that. So once again, we had 30 years in one system. Now it's in a data warehouse. And I think that's just the hard part, because not everybody else has access to that. That's just on Lennon and Lennon, so.
And just, I mean, the last comment that I have on, I mean, now that the county has kind of cleaned these things up, it's important to continue to keep them up to date. So as grants are expiring, I'm hoping the grants policy will trigger some initial review over a very short period of time to make sure that the county does not get behind on the grant accounting in future years. I think that's the key from my perspective moving forward.
To me, the stability is the key, because, I mean, there for years, we were a revolving door of talent in, out, and not just on fiscal itself, but on all the agencies, and having the policy in place and having it set up in our financial system, now we can manage everything and keep an eye on them much better than in the past.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments on the grants work? All right, so item 7C, the recommendation for the revision to the Cuyahoga County Charter. So this has been, again, kind of a long-standing agenda item. I hope we are at the point now that we have language that kind of fits with what the audit committee is trying to do with the change to the charter. It has incorporated, I think, some kind of key revisions from the prosecutor's office, and so maybe just kind of ask Corey to. We've looked at this many times over the last couple of meetings. I think we're at the point now of saying that maybe this would be the final charter language to be considered moving forward. There were a few, I think, minor tweaks from the last time we reviewed this, so if you want to go over it, then.
Yes, so I have it up on the screen here and also attached as A7.C in your attachments. There are two revisions since the last meeting. One of them was brought up at the meeting, and that had to do with the free and unrestricted access to records, trying to mirror as best we can the Inspector General's language in the charter. So I went through and worked with Mark Musson too on this to revise this language so it mirrors the Inspector General's office. I will say the only thing that wasn't part of ours that's in the AIG's office charter is that they talk about legal documents and those types of records in their charter. We stuck to just records, data, information, property, personnel, so kind of kept it a little bit more vague. They had more in there on legal information and legal documents that I didn't think was necessary to add in internal audits language. But other than that, all the language here that you see was revised to match the Inspector General's.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. Section 1104, it's the third page of the PDF, first paragraph, continued from the prior page. It says, if deemed necessary and directed by the County Audit Committee, the Department of Internal Audit may conduct audits for fraud of any recipient of funds appropriated by council in coordination with or without the Department of Inspector General. I'm just trying to understand when we would do that without involving the Inspector General.
I will say in my time here, there's never been any involvement without Inspector General in that. According to the county code, we are supposed to report, every employee is supposed to report any fraudulent activity or suspected fraudulent activity to the Inspector General's office. I read that as if the Internal Audit Department does potentially find any potential fraudulent activity, that we could work with the Inspector General's office to investigate if they need our assistance.
May I ask,
Mike.
new guy here, does the county have a whistleblower hotline?
Yes.
And who monitors that?
The Inspector General, Agency of Inspector General's office. They have
Okay.
they have the ethics policy, the ethics code, the whistleblower hotline, fraud hotline, is all through the Inspector General.
So if there's a credible allegation, do they coordinate then with your office to investigate it, or do they just investigate it?
They typically will just investigate it. If there's any coordination that they feel that we could be a part of, maybe based on an audit that we're working on, that's happened in the past where they might contact us to ask us questions. But
Okay.
as from my experience, it's all been Inspector General would be the one to investigate and do all the work and reach out if they needed to.
And how many, roughly how many calls do they get? I mean, is it a common occurrence, very sporadic, or?
She has an annual report. If you want, you can look. It details that. So maybe on the website of Inspector General,
Okay.
she'll list all the calls, the complaints. I mean, she has a pretty detailed, and she reports to council annually, right? Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
I can send you that report, Rich, too.
Oh, I could, if it's online?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to follow up on my question. I'm not sure I got the answer. In what instance would we investigate a fraud without involving the Inspector General?
There could be part of an audit, there could be initial investigation that we would look in before we send it off to the Inspector General, just to make sure we are confident it should be sent to them. As far as investigating audits for fraud, I mean, we do a fraud risk assessment at the end of, or the beginning of every audit as well. So I don't know if that would be part of the conducting audits for fraud of any recipient of funds appropriated by council. I see it as we can assist with the investigation if need be, or if we do find any fraud, send it to the Inspector General, or potential fraud, send it to the Inspector General and work with them to review it. If there's any work that we can provide during that time, we'll work with the Inspector Generals to help them. If say they can't get to it right away and we need it to complete our audit, we'll work with them in that way. But there's also, if there's any coordination with any other agency outside the county, like the prosecutor's office or AG's office, potentially could be work done there. But our first process there is to go through the Inspector General's office.
Might
Mr.
it be a situation where the alleged fraud implicated someone in the Inspector General's office that might cause you not to go there initially?
That could be the case, yes.
Or, Mr. Chairman, just a perceived conflict of interest, not necessarily implicating the Inspector General's office, but if they felt it was close enough to necessitate an outside look, this would provide that relief.
Are you suggesting the language should be adjusted?
No, not at this point. I just want clarification that we, in every case that we possibly can, we'd involve the Inspector General, and that's what I'm hearing. And I'm not sure if there are any more questions, but when it's time to approve this, I think the procedural is that we're making a recommendation to the county council, because we can't approve this change, and then they take it from there. Is that procedurally what we plan on doing here?
I think we would, I think the
Charter
the
review
process would
process.
be, yeah, that we would approve it, and then it would go to the Charter Review Committee process first, before it ultimately goes to county council. So I would think the Charter Review Committee would want to know that the Audit Committee actually approved it before they entertained it, but
Since the process is going to start sometime from now, do we want to make that formal recommendation today, or do we want to wait on this piece?
I mean, that's certainly a decision for you in the future. I think we had decided in the planning meeting to just discuss it today, make sure that everybody's kind of fine with the language, and then put off the formal approval until it was ready to go to the Charter Review Committee.
Thanks.
Okay, so any other questions on this? So I can comfortably come off the committee, knowing that this is in place, and with the hope that ultimately this will get into the county charter. So I think items D, E, and F are kind of all interrelated in regards to changes that are needed for all of those documents, including the name change, which we talked about at the last meeting. This is all due to implementation of the global auditing standards, if I have the right terminology. So with that, again, I think we talked about most of these at the last meeting, but you can give an update. And these, I think we are looking for approval on.
Correct. Yeah, I'll go over the audit committee charter and the internal audit charter first. These changes were presented to the audit committee at the third quarter meeting. The revisions were necessary, like Mr. Boozerall said, to align with the new standards and to provide more consistent language in the charters. The red line versions include comments explaining the reason for the changes and how the committee currently complies with the language. The only update since the last meeting to these charters, in the audit committee charter, after discussion, we did decide to change the audit committee charter to call it audit committee bylaws. That way it's not confusing when we talk about charters on a daily basis or at this meeting. The audit committee, or the internal audit charter, which is attached as, so A7D is the audit committee charter amendments, and then A7E is the internal audit charter amendment. In the internal audit charter amendment, we are going to recommend to call it the internal audit code, as this relates just to the Department of Internal Audit. So those were the two main changes to those. Also in the newly called code, we did update the language on page 2 based on our discussion last meeting for the director to administer a report to a member of the audit committee or management to support day-to-day activities. So this language, in my opinion, does not change the current process or the reporting structure, which includes, as we talked about, timesheet approval. So the director will continue to submit timesheets through HR, certified by HR, which is currently Pat Smock. And then one thing that I recommended, and I spoke to Trevor and Mike Chambers about, was that the fiscal officer and council president have access to view the director's timesheet going forward. So that way, if there's any questions or anyone even on the committee wants to view it as well, that they can pull the timesheet up and send it off or ask questions about it, rather than the whole approval process. Because I believe the approval process right now is the same as PRC. It's the same as IG, the independent agencies go through. But to be in compliance with our standards and this code, just giving access to an audit committee member, being the fiscal officer and council president or designee. And also, we would still remain, the day-to-day support would be with the fiscal officer as far as signing off on travel, employee reimbursements that's being done currently.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of edits on the A7D. In section 12 on page 5, talks about the biannual budget. I think that's supposed to be biennial, every 2 years. So BIENNIAL.
Sorry, Sal, what page you say?
On page 5.
Oh, okay.
I believe that should be biennial, every 2 years. And then same edit in the code, under authority and mandate, it talks about biannual. Budget should be biennial.
Yeah, that was real good.
Wow.
That's been that way since 2012.
And it shows up again, if you do the search,
Just look for the, okay,
yeah.
all right, I think so.
Corey, I don't know if you want to rethink of a different word for code, just because we have the county code. I don't want to run the same issue that we've had with the charter, every time we're
Yeah.
talking about the charter. I don't know if we want to use like regulations or something, I don't know, I probably would not use code.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've talked internally on what to call this. It's been tough.
Had all the confusion with the two charters, I just don't want to, when we say code, I want to
We
make
called
sure.
it, yeah, call it code, okay.
I'm sorry, there is one other thing, in the, what we're not gonna call the code anymore, but the, A7E, it talks about, sorry, let me find it here.
This is the internal audit charter, or code, yeah.
Right, where we're going to do the, we're gonna do a peer review every 3 years. I'm just wondering if we need to do one every 3 years? Or should we extend that to 4 or 5 years? I don't know if it's necessary to do it. It says every 3 years or less, or something like that. I can't find the language right now.
At
but-
least, oh, sorry, it's on page 8. This section was actually revised at the last meeting. We had discussion around when to do the external peer review, because our 3-year period would be up actually a couple months ago. So there was recommended or language revisions to the last part of that section where we, the audit committee did approve for deferring beyond the 3-year period, but not more than 5 years, which is in compliance with the internal audit standards. And then I think after that, the committee made a motion to allow for us to go up to 5 years on the external review. So I think that all was changed.
At least every 3 years.
Right.
I think that gives us the wiggle room to do 3, 4, or 5 years.
I would say at least every 5 years. At least every 3 years, you gotta do it.
So the second part of that does allow the committee to defer the
I'd rather
external.
not proactively have to defer, though, I don't know. 5 if Corey would
Would you
be
say
okay
not
with
more
that.
than 5 years? Yeah, that'll keep us in compliance with the audit standards.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay with that, Corey? Like,
Yes.
as it from a, okay.
Yeah, and then if, is everyone okay calling them regulations? I'm fine with that.
So any more discussion before we formally approve these? Are we okay with approving them at this meeting?
Can you approve them with the amendments discussed? Is that how? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so regarding the annual review of the audit committee
Bylaws.
bylaws, we need a motion to approve the revised audit committee bylaws with the
So
revisions.
moved.
to every Okay, second? Okay, so all in favor of approving the revised audit committee bylaws, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. We need a motion to approve the revision to the internal audit regulations as revised today during the meeting.
Moved as amended.
Okay, all in, the second?
I think Mel Trees.
Okay. All in favor of approving the revisions or the internal audit regulations as revised at today's meeting, say aye?
Aye.
All right. All right, that takes care of both of those. So you want to talk about, did we talk about the internal audit manual?
Yeah, so this, Item 7C is going to be it says annual review of internal audit policy. This specifically relates to our audit manual, which currently still is a work in progress with the new standards and updates to some of the processes that we're identifying some improvements. So it does outline our audit procedures. We do want to take some more time to review and go through this. It's a 70-page document on our audit procedures that we don't want to rush it. So we do need more time to update this, so I'm just asking for this just to be deferred to discussion at the next meeting.
Could you do like a brief summary of what you're proposing to change, just to help the audit committee understand just potentially what you're gonna?
So updating procedures in our audit manual would be improvements to the audit work papers, updating to the new standards. A lot of our work papers are a lot of our audit procedures, audit programs, our reports, the process with the new system especially for signing off on audit work papers, on audit work that's being done, the process of signing off on issues and findings and recommendations, and then also we're doing a really deep dive look into the follow-up process as well and trying to improve those processes and automate that a little bit more. That would give us more time to work on other audits as well. So that whole process we don't want to rush into making a lot of changes on and asking for approval today.
Any other discussion on the internal audit? Are we keeping this name in the internal audit policy?
Right, it'll be, so this section actually encompasses internal audit policy, so we have, the record retention policy is part of that, but this is referring to the audit manual, the actual manual. Yeah.
Okay. Item 7G, the semi-annual issue tracker report. Josh? Okay.
All right, go ahead, Josh.
All right, so this report kind of shows our remediation testing efforts that we conducted during the first half of 2024. The second half of 2024 and year as a whole will be reported on at the next meeting. The first 2 pages are basically a list of audits that have been released from this department as far back as 2017. It gives the total recommendation count, as well as the second set of columns on the right shows how many are still open. Some of those are somewhat aged, particularly the procurement process for IT contracts. There's 11 of those. The reason being for that particular engagement is that we were actually hoping to use IT services to conduct that testing. Now, with the change in budget this past year, we started looking at those to conduct the testing in-house, and that's currently in process. So another one was the IT inventory. This is actually our 3rd year of testing on that particular engagement. Conclusions have always been partially or not resolved. We're actually started regular meetings with the IT department. I'm hoping that we can kind of use those to get a little more insight and push them along. The MEO, there was one that's left with the medical examiner's office. They had a delay in implementation due to a staffing change as well as a budget constraint. So they're hoping for 2025. So those are kind of the top 3, at least for now. Moving on to...
I've got a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go. Trevor, so I realize every situation is different and every department is different. Are there consequences for people in responsibility in the departments when particularly high, those issues ranked high just are not ultimately remediated? What happens?
At the end of the year, we do issue a year-end memo that goes to the appropriate agency authority. So, all of this in this case, it's a memo that's issued to the executive. Katie's actually been helping us somewhat on getting some of those higher priority ones.
And does council see that report as well?
I believe they are CC'd on it, yes.
Okay.
But you present, when you do your presentation, don't you present this to the county council, your annual presentation?
Present the yes, we present the results, and this is included actually in the update to council as well. Summary page here. I will say that, just to add a little bit more, Keith, to that, we do, if there are some significant risks or higher risks that have still been outstanding, to Katie, and she's been following up for us too, or at least help with that follow-up process. That's actually one of the processes that we are reviewing. I mean, we have some issues here, especially higher issues that have been issues for a while. So there needs to be a process in place for us to, after 3 years, after 5 years, what do we do with them? Do we send out an email saying, hey, you haven't responded, you haven't fixed these issues, we're going to assume management accepts the risks, and then starts a communication process with the audit committee, escalating it after we've gone through all these executive's office and reporting on everything. So there's got to be a process that we're not every 6 months talking about. That's something that we've been discussing internally.
And I would say one of the higher priority ones, the sheriff ones, they are being audited too by Inspector General. So there's multiple things going on that they're kind of crossing over, I'd say, right now.
That's a good example too, because we could rely on what the Inspector General's office is coordinating with them if we feel they've addressed some of the issues from these audits.
Talk a little bit about the child support services. Is 5 still high? What are those? What
To be honest, I would have to pull up the detail, which I can do that, to look at the details. We have a meeting with them later this afternoon to talk about the outstanding and finish up. So we're hoping to see resolution on the next report. Mm-hmm. All right. So, first half activity starts
Can I
on.
just ask one more question on this? Just
Sure.
So, to move from the left side of these columns to the right side of these columns, or whichever way it goes, it doesn't necessarily mean that the department has implemented the recommendations, correct? It just means that you guys have audited what they, well, you clarify that. So those 15 recommendations that were issued, 8 of them are deemed to be high priority. So how do we know whether or not the department has resolved, if that's the right terminology, those
It's-
8?
We could have theoretically, we could have added a third set of columns, but I just thought that was getting pretty wide. Basically, if they're not in the open remediation or recommendation count, then they've been resolved in one form or another. We don't, if something's partially or not resolved, it stays on here.
Okay.
So if it's fallen off, then that means that either we've withdrawn the recommendation due to some change in the process, or they fully resolved the issue.
Okay. Okay, good.
I don't know if we want to go through the actual testing activity for the year or.
Yeah, if you want to,
Yeah.
we don't need to.
Yeah.
We'll have a report for the annual and the 6 month here in the next month anyway. So it'll be more updated, so we'll go through it all then.
If I recall, the letter you sent to the county executive about the open items, you do CC the audit committee members on that, all the audit committee members on that? Okay. When you presented to the county council, did they have any interest in this? In the, kind of the understanding of where the departments have been in resolving the?
I didn't get any questions or discussion related to that, no.
Okay.
The year prior, I believe Councilman Miller did inquire on some of that topic.
Is it actually part of your presentation to go over that, or only if they ask questions?
There was a slide on the recommendations that were pretty part of that presentation.
open recommendation or the
I did reference it during the
It's in
presentation.
the written,
Yeah,
his
it was in the report.
Am I the only one that's alarmed by the number of recommendations that?
Not the only one.
No.
These are the constant follow-up items that have more months. Katie's help.
I mean, is it, just to follow up on that, is it, so the more recent ones that are still sitting over here, you haven't yet potentially gone back into these entities to determine whether or not they resolved the issue. That's why they're still on this document?
Correct. I mean, we generally do what I call keeping the pulse, so to speak. It's basically just every few months, we will send an email saying, okay, hey, where are you? So we want to keep it on the radar so that they keep it in mind to work on that remediation effort. Generally, we've got a methodology established for like when we actually conduct a follow-up test, though. So it's usually one of two things, either establish timeline that we've set up as a deadline, or when they come back and say, we fully resolved. So whichever one is first is kind of when we test and report on.
So is there a chance for some of the more recent ones that although they're sitting on the right part of this schedule and they're sitting in the high column, that the department has actually implemented and resolved the issue? That's why it's
Over the
in
last 6 months, yes.
So there's possibility that the department has actually resolved these, but because they haven't gone back out and tested them, they're still on the schedule. Right, did I say that correctly?
Timing, yes.
Mr. Chairman, just to Mel Treese's point, I just want to clarify that these issues are not necessarily misappropriation or fraud. These are just high-risk areas that need to be addressed in order to prevent that kind of thing in the future. Thank you.
So this is the first time we've actually had some time to go over this in the last number of meetings. So it really is an important part of the work that internal audit's doing. So hopefully in future meetings, you'll have time to continue to allocate time to that. Okay, so if there's no other questions on item G, item H, the conformance to the revised auditing standards. So I think we've talked about this before. I do think it's required for internal audit to do a kind of an overview to the audit committee about the impact that the new auditing standards would have both on the committee as well as the department. So it's kind of required to show that we're complying with the standards to have this presentation presented to us. So with that, Corey?
Okay, thank you, Mike. I included a presentation in your packet. It is A-7.H. This is a requirement under the new standards to go through with the audit committee and senior management some of the changes to the internal audit standards. So I included a PowerPoint that I did send out to the audit committee even before the last audit committee meeting. So I'm not going to go through every single one in detail. I know when you look at this, you're like, oh crap, there's 29 slides. I'm not going to go through them all in detail unless you want me to stop at any of them as we go through. But I really want to just touch on some of the important changes I feel like the audit committee should be aware of. Some of the newer requirements for the audit committee that I'll address how we as a department with the audit committee plan to make sure we're in compliance with the new standards. And then at the end, I have some impacts to the internal audit department, which go more in line with our actual procedures going forward, which is the reason why we're deferring some of those audit manual revisions. So first, I do want to note some important dates. I think you all are aware of these dates, but the most important time for implementing these measures or these standards have been the last 6 months, really over the last year. But we are into December of 2024, so educating staff, educating the audit committee and county management on the new standards. This presentation here will show our compliance with the standards and educating the audit committee and county management on these standards. So over the last 4 to 5 months, as a staff, we have been going through completing gap assessments on the old standards and the new standards to identify any changes that we need to make as the audit committee just approved our changes to the bylaws and the regulations. So thank you for that. That is part of our gap assessment that we can check off that has been done. January 9th of 2025 is the effective date of the new standards. So we must implement these policies and procedures by then throughout 2025. So the deferral of the peer review was very important to go out through 2026. So that still gives us time to make sure everything is up to date in case we run into something that we didn't identify through our gap assessment here. The next few slides include some tables and pictures on the old versus new structure. I think what it's important to know is that there are 5 domains now with the new structure. I'll focus on domain 3 today, which it'll be on slide 5, is governing the internal audit function. So this is actually the audit committee's oversight and requirements by the audit committee, which I know I've talked about during our revisions of the charters or the bylaws and the regulations, but the audit committee for the most part is already following these standards. A lot of that was just referencing to the new standards, so I'll go over that as well through these slides. One of the newer requirements for domain 3 as a whole is discussing this domain and the standards with as I mentioned, the audit committee and the management. So we'll comply with this today. We just have to document it in agenda items and presentations in the minutes. So this will show compliance with this domain 3 after the presentation is completed. Slide 9 talks about what the standard's called essential conditions. This is requirements under the new standards that the audit committee must follow. I'll go through all those essential conditions or anything that the audit committee needs to do in addition to what you're doing now to comply with these essential conditions. There are 3 principles in domain 5. I'll go over all 3 of them. These include those essential conditions. Principle 6 talks about authorization by the committee. Principle 7 is the committee being positioned independently. And then Principle 8 is that oversight of the committee over the Department of Internal Audit. Slide 12. So these slides here, I think, are the most important for the audit committee to review. What we need from you is the areas of the principles that I've gone through and documented out of the essential conditions, what the audit committee is currently doing or needs to do to comply with the standards. The Principle 6, we do show that there is compliance with all of Principle 6, basically through the county charter, through the committee bylaws, and through the internal audit code or internal audit regulations. We got code written down everywhere now, Trevor. The new requirements in standard 6.3 is that the director must coordinate with the audit committee's communications with senior management, which is already done annually and through audit committee meetings, through emails. So any type of communication with the audit committee and the director of internal audit, making sure that it's communicated to senior management if appropriate. So that's a new requirement here that we've already established and are complying with or have been. Principle 7 is the committee establishing and protecting the internal audit function's independence and qualifications. Again, for the most part, with the county charter, the committee bylaws, and the internal audit regulation, the committee is complying with this principle. There is a direct reporting relationship with the director and the audit committee and senior management as well. Standard 7.2 on slide 16. This talks about the director helping or assisting the audit committee in understanding the qualifications and competencies of the director role. The county charter does include qualifications for the director role, and appointment of a director does occur every 4 years, so there is discussion on the director role every 4 years. However, the director should be have detailed discussions with the audit committee on specific qualifications and most importantly, succession planning in the near future. So that's actually part of the standards now, is to make sure we're having that discussion, which I'll make sure that we're including that in future discussions, especially on the succession planning conversations. Principle 8, this is more of the oversight from the Audit Committee on the Department of Internal Audit. There are, starting in slide 18, there are 3 slides here that document the essential conditions. And again, most of these essential conditions the committee is in compliance with on the oversight piece. The only new requirement that I'll go on to is approval of the performance objectives, so KPIs, and the department goals. I know there's been a lot of discussion on KPIs and department goals, but actual formal approval on those every year is required out of the new standards. So that'll be something that we'll discuss and bring up at the next meeting on specific performance objectives for the Department of Internal Audit to be approved. Standard 8.4, so this is the last standard I'll go over for a new requirement. This is, the new requirement here is on the external peer review. The peer review team that comes in has to have a certified internal auditor on staff for the peer review team. So we have to make sure that whoever we hire, whoever comes in to do our peer review in 2026, that they have a CIA designation, at least one of the staff members. There are newer sections in the audit standards that talk about applying the new standards in the public sector. I brought this up before, where being in the public sector it is different. It could be structured different. The political environment, the county charters, the citizen voted charters is a lot different than the private sector. So they do recognize that in the new standards. So any deviation from the standards that I know, Keith, you brought up in the past, we do need to fully document. And to me, documenting that is not only writing it down, but discussing it at an audit committee as well, if we do deviate from the standards in any way. So they do have some language in there on that. Then the impact to internal audit, the last 4 slides. So we have been, over the last 5 to 6 months, we have been going through like I said, the gap assessment, identifying any gaps in our processes, our policies from the old standards to the new standards. Gaps identified that we need to include in our own performance objectives or our evaluations include the ethics of professional domain, the standards in there, including stuff like honesty and professional courage for performance objectives to staff evaluations. We also need to have staff acknowledgement of the IAA's ethical expectations, which they do have a form for us to complete. And then one of the requirements is having 1 hour of training on ethics and professional standards every year. We'll incorporate. And then managing the internal audit functions, this is more on the procedures, but one of them is actually having some sort of a website or newsletter, which we are working on. I'll give an update here shortly for DIA and its roles and benefits with employees and stakeholders. We need to update our current checklist for internal assessment as well. And the final domain, which is performing internal audit services, we have not, as of today, we have not identified any gaps. So I know I ran through that pretty quickly, so I apologize, but if there's any questions or you want me to back off or back up onto a slide, I'll be happy to answer anything.
Is it just 1 hour of ethics, or I thought it was 2 hours?
I saw 1 hour. Is it 2 hours?
CIAs are required 2
CIAs? Okay, because everybody scrambles this time of year to get 2 hours.
Oh, so it's just the CIA that's 2 hours. Yeah, I saw 1 hour in the actual standards. So I guess if you don't have a CIA, you have to get the 1 hour in.
So just a couple comments from me. So and this is just from my understanding of this, but a lot of work was done by internal audit to ultimately get the county to the stage. Probably safe to say that we got a little bit of a late start in actually going through the process to make sure that we are effectively implementing these standards by the dates. And so I just want to thank Josh and Corey on that. That was one of the reasons why some of the audits had to actually be deferred into 2025. But, you know, there was a specific time constraint associated with making sure that we were complying with it. Interestingly, when you look at the changes that we have to make to ensure compliance with the new standards, either we're in compliance already with the work that we've been doing historically, or I believe some of the things that have to be implemented are we've either talked about or we're able to implement pretty quickly, which I think is, again, I think a tribute to the work that's been done by the department as well as the audit committee moving forward. So thank you for all your work on this. And
You gotta
again,
thank the whole staff, because everyone had to take a section over the last 5 months and go through them all, so everyone on staff, thank you.
Any other comments on the presentation or the work that has to move forward? So, I mean, there are some follow-up items that have been identified by Corey, and hopefully you just continue to make sure that, you know, moving forward, everybody's in compliance. I did forget to thank, when I was making some remarks before, the prosecutor's office in regards to the role that the prosecutor's office has been playing with the committee, and specifically to Mark for putting up with Corey over all these years. And it wasn't me; I was the easy one to get along with. But for all your guidance and your support, and the legal opinions and everything else that we've asked you to do over the years. So just thanks for all of that. Haven't always agreed, but at least we got them and we had an opportunity to discuss them, which I think is important. Any other discussion on the standards? All right. So the next item is a departmental goals update. So that was actually referenced a little bit in the presentation. And again, this is something that the audit committee has been requesting the department to do for a few years now. There is a plan that has been put in place by the internal audit department that Corey will go over, and more importantly, a pretty good update on some of the items that we've been asking to the department to do, and ultimately they're in a position of doing it. And all of this has to do with what we thought was necessary, and that is kind of increasing the visibility of the department within the county, and having county departments and agencies know that the work is A, required, but also B, being comfortable enough to approach the department for assistance, which is a great thing in the internal audit process, right? I mean, it's one thing to say that we're gonna audit you because you're on the audit plan. It's a much better thing for the departments to be able to say, hey, we need some help here, and knowing that the internal audit department is a resource for them to get some assistance with. So with that, I'll turn it over to Corey.
Yep, thank you, Mike. Agenda item A7, so .9 would be the exhibits. This was included in the packet in the their third quarter audit committee meeting. So what we did was we created a get-to-know DIA campaign outline. And so we've been able to update that outline and progress on that over the last 3 months. But I just want to go over progress on this. If anyone had any questions too on the approach, I'd be happy to answer any questions. So we created this outline to promote the value of internal audit, increase awareness of internal audit's role throughout Cuyahoga County. I know this is a 2024 goal, but there are steps that have been identified to achieve the goal and take place in 25 as well. So included in your packet is that draft plan. Staff did take some time over the last 3 to 5 months to research potential best practices from other internal audit shops across the nation, looking for ways to increase our footprint in the county and educate county employees on our purpose and value-added services. We did come across 3 initiatives, which is listed here on the plan. We have been able to make progress on all 3 of them over the last couple months. Currently, we are in the implementation stage of creating a website with IT. I do have a Q2 of 2025 go live date. I will say our recent discussion sounds like it's going to be much sooner, but I'm going to leave the Q2 on there. So that's been a great discussion with the IT department, so I appreciate the work that they're going through to get that up, a new website for us up. We did utilize the county's In the Know email to notify departments of the annual risk assessment process that was done in September. In October, we did present to the county executives cabinet on our role in the county, which I thought that was a good presentation. I did receive actually some follow-up from some department heads after that presentation as well, with some questions, so that was good. We are currently developing material and recurring communication to use in 2025. I know I've mentioned this before, but one of the things we want to do in Q1 of 2025 is do a recurring email out to all county staff, and actually discuss that with IT while we're discussing our new website. So it sounds like they would be very helpful with that as well. So that material I do plan to send to the audit committee once we have that, especially our first email ready to go, just to get your input if you have time to review it. So we'll continue to update the audit committee on this process as we move forward, but I think we've made some good progress over the last few months.
Okay, so any questions on the Department of Internal Audit campaign plan? Campaign plan? All right, great progress on this one. This has been something that's been requested by the committee for a number of years now. So item J, the 2025 budget update. So this again has been a point of discussion for many audit committee meetings. So again, the audit committee had approved a budget, I don't even know what year we're talking about, a while ago for both 24 and 25. There have been some pretty significant changes between the original budget that the audit committee had approved and ultimately what was recommended by the county executive for approval by the county council. There's been some kind of back and forth between Corey and leadership here within the county about maybe a revised budget for 2025. I think that there's one in place now that internal audit is comfortable with. So with that, I'll turn it over to Corey and you can give a kind of a high-level update.
Thank you. Included in your attachments is the 2025 budget comparison. So just like we talked about, or we presented last meeting, this comparison shows what the audit committee originally approved, which was about a year and a half ago for 2025, and then what our revised budget is for 2025, and then the executives, which was approved by council on, was it last Tuesday, Trevor, I think, the 3rd? The 3rd was the approval for the 2025 budget update. So you'll see in this attachment, which is A-7.J, two additions that I do want to talk about. These additions relate to the $20,000 for operational needs as we presented at the 3rd quarter meeting. If you recall, we were $20,000 short in other expenses based on operational needs for our audit software, our training, certificates. So I do want to thank the executive and county council for approving the additional $20,000 for our operational needs next year. Then there was also added payroll adjustments, which included a pay equity study and pay adjustments based on a countywide, I believe would be a countywide initiative on classified employees that was conducted and added to our budget. So that'll be something that I will send out an email to the committee on how all that works out. But we do have budget for 2025 to be able to implement those adjustments. The differences, just to note, the differences in the audit committee approved budget and the DIA and executive council budget, specifically the internal, or the peer review assessment, which was budgeted at $25,000 this year. As you know, we did move that out 2 more years. So that $25,000 was not included in the 2025 budget. And then the additional IT resource of, it would have been about $130,000 altogether. That was not included in the 2025 budget.
So as I understand it, you contract with a third party for IT audit assistance?
We actually have never contracted with a third party other than last year, we did have a third-party contract with Janus and Associates. They did an IT risk assessment for us, and they developed, I'll talk about it a little bit with our audit plan. They
Okay.
developed a plan for us, a work program for us, and made recommendations. So we are going through that whole process with IT right now to determine, what IT resources we need going forward and potentially a 2026, 27 budget update for a request for additional IT resources.
Okay, I was just looking at the footnote, the 3-star, 3 asterisks. The county has several high-risk areas within IT which need to be audited. This budget would provide for an external resource, as DIA does not currently have the expertise needed.
Yeah, that was in, Josh, you know where that was? Oh, the IT audit resources, services. Yeah, this was included in the 2024 budget, so it's not in the 25. I think the plan initially was to include a IT auditor position for 2025. This was years ago, if I
Oh,
recall.
okay, all right.
So that budget was not included.
I think it's just kind of clarifying where we were at when we approved the initial one.
Right.
And there's a whole, Rich, there's a whole history behind this one. You might want to just touch base with Corey after the meeting to get the kind of the whole history
Okay.
of where we, and Josh, kind of where we started, where we were, where we ultimately ended up, the report that's actually been produced, and maybe what their plans are for this, or at your next meeting, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
But there's a long history behind this one.
All right.
So I think the suggestion, if there's no other questions on the budget, I think the suggestion is, since we formally approved the first 2025 budget, that maybe we should be approving kind of the revised 2025 budget. Is that?
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, just so it's maybe for the record.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I guess kind of good.
Is an approval needed?
Yeah, so the charter actually requires us to approve a budget,
Right.
which we
Which you
did,
did.
which we did
Okay.
so many years ago. But since it's changed, I think we should probably continue to approve the revisions to it, just as a format.
Corey, how many employees are getting the equity adjustment within the department?
There are 4. I'm waiting on just an update. I'm waiting on a report from HR with the study too. So this is still in progress because I don't have all the details yet, but the budget was added for 2025, so I'll have to take a look and then I'll update the committee on what happens after that.
So we need a motion to approve the revised budget for internal audit for 2025.
So moved.
So all in favor of approving the revised budget for internal audit for 2025, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And just for, why we're just talking about the budget, so if I have my timeline right, sometime the second quarter of 2025, next year, you'll be talking about the 2027 budget? Is that how it works with the calendar?
2026 and 2027.
So you'll have an opportunity to discuss this in a couple of meetings for the biennium budget for the next 2 years. Okay, so we are on to other business. So item A is the hiring of the staff auditor. So again, part of our responsibility as the audit committee is to approve all hirings for the department. So we had provided, I don't know what the terminology is, an okay, I guess, and moving forward and hiring Tiana. Welcome to the meeting. So the purpose of today is to kind of formally reflect in our meeting our formal approval of the position. So I don't know if we need any more discussion on that or just a motion to approve the hiring.
Move to approve the staff auditor hiring.
Second.
All in favor of approving Tiana for the position, say aye.
Aye.
All right, perfect. Welcome. Hopefully the meeting is informative and useful and. All right. So item 8B, the records retention schedule. So as internal audit was finishing their audit that they did that we'll talk about later, I think there was maybe a realization that internal audit did not have a formal records retention schedule that had been approved by the audit committee, so.
We-
if
We
I'm-
did, but
We did, okay, all right, I take that back. So anyways,
we weren't following all the processes, and that's what we.
okay. Do we have one that you want us to approve, or are you still,
Yes, item 8-A-8.B includes our record retention schedule. That, we did add items on page 4 of that document. We did go back through our record retention schedule that was approved in 2013. So the audit committee actually did originally approve this record retention schedule. And it was sent off through the state. It just didn't go through the whole county records commission process that is in the code. And we'll talk about that during our reports discussions, our current reports. So I am recommending that through, in accordance with the ORC 148-38 and County Code Section 106, that the audit committee approve the updated schedule. These are records that we added over the last 10 years that were initially not included. I did have, I know, Mike, you and I talked about personnel records. I did talk to the HR director, so all of our personnel records are retained with the HR department.
Keep that, right?
Right.
You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, so that's not included on here.
So I have no specific questions about the schedule. The challenge I've always found with regards to record retention isn't creating the policy, it's actually implementing it. Could you just spend a minute or two and talk about how we actually are able to purge when the prescribed time is met?
Yes, that's a great question. I think it's difficult for every public official to be able to go through all of your records. But I think what's nice about the newer requirements, newer as in, I think like 5 or 6 years ago, is that you don't have to send all of your, if you have paper copies, you don't have to send everything down to the state. If this is approved through the state process, or they don't really approve it, they just acknowledge it, that you still have to fill out your RC3, you still have to fill out the record retention disposal form. So that just has to be internally a process for us that annually, typically a lot of places just annually on a certain day, we go through the last year and see what we need to dispose of. Fill out the RC3 and send it through the process. So that has to be, in our internal policy that hasn't been done so well in the past. So we need to make sure that we are incorporating that into our audit manual, into our procedures to go through that process and purging information. I know they just went through a purge with the Teammate Plus implementation, but that should be something that we're doing every year.
Corey, if you update your records retention policy, you don't have to fill out the RC form anymore. Like if you're in compliance with the Ohio, I would look into that, because if you do modifications now, you could put essentially a blanket statement on there where you don't have to, only in limited circumstances, fill out the RC form.
Okay, I'll look into that.
I mean, you
thought
still have to keep a disposal list for your own records, but you don't have to submit it to the state.
Is that right? Okay, thank you.
As long as when you're sending it down through the Auditor of State and the local whatever the Historical Society is now, do not check that box on the far column,
This
RC3
box out
required, right,
Okay.
yeah. I would not check that yourself. Make,
Make them check it.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is most of this stuff electronic these days? Anyway, almost all of this stuff?
Almost all of our work papers are electronic.
And like, where do you keep the files physically?
We have
Computer?
we have a shared drive through the county IT network to
Okay,
keep all of our files, and then we have our own personal network drives that we keep any files that we don't want on the shared drive or don't need on the shared drive. So it's all through the county's servers.
okay.
If there's no other questions on the public, on the record retention schedule, I think we need a motion to approve the record retention schedule that's been presented today.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the records retention schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, perfect. Okay, so items C and D, so obviously this is one of the most important things that the department does as well as the audit committee does. They kind of obviously link together, so there is the risk assessment that, you know, Court, maybe you could just spend a minute going kind of explaining a little bit, make sure everybody's kind of familiar with what you do and why you do it. That ultimately then leads to the development of the 2025 audit plan. So we do need to formally approve the risk assessment, and then we also provide, historically, we just kind of provide, it's almost tentative approval on the audit plan, so they can start moving forward with it between now and the next meeting. So it is a very, you know, I reviewed it, had some conversations with Corey about it. It certainly does hit, I think, some key points here at the county. There's been some involvement, which I think is actually a great step by both the county leadership on the executive side as well as county council. So what is being presented today kind of incorporates some of the thoughts and ideas from both branches of government, which I think then helps formulate what I'm considering to be a very good audit plan for 2025. But there's a lot of audits in here. It's kind of some new steps that I'd let just Corey explain to the committee.
Okay, thank you. If okay with you, Mike, I'd like to go through both the risk assessment and the audit plan all at the same time. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to interrupt. So in your attachments as A-8.C, I've included the 2025 risk assessment draft for today for discussion and respectfully request approval by the audit committee of the risk assessment report. The county charter and our international internal auditing standards do require us to establish a risk-based audit plan. This must be developed on an annual basis with an annual risk assessment that we start performing in September, and it goes all the way through October, November of every year. We have completed our 9th risk assessment in as many years. The results of those risk assessments are in the report that's attached and included in your agenda materials. We do have 76 auditable units to consider for our annual audit plan, mostly made up of executive agencies. Our auditable units are mostly just department and divisions. We do want to get to a point where we have more functional auditable units as we go forward. So that will be part of our plan for next year as we have budget in there for our DIA excellence project to work on that and the risk assessment project. So I'll talk about that later. The process for how we conducted the risk assessments is included in the reports as well. We distributed questionnaires to all auditable units except for areas that are currently undergoing an audit or areas that have been audited over the past 2 years. In the questionnaires, we did ask for departments to answer questions related to internal control processes, compliance requirements, cash collections, and other financial and economic factors. Again, those are all in the report and listed in a table. We use these answers from the questionnaires to score each auditable unit. The scores are calculated in our audit management system by risk impact and risk likelihood. These scores help us develop our audit plan for the subsequent year along with any other management requests that we will consider. The results of the risk assessment are in Appendix B of the report, ranked by total inherent risk by auditable unit. Appendix C provides a description of each auditable unit ranked high or very high, which is a score greater than 8. So there is a description on each of those auditable units and how we plan to show that coverage of review or audit for that auditable unit. Based on the current and the prior year risk assessments, the 2024 audit plan, conversations with the executive, council staff, we did establish the 2025 audit plan that's presented for the audit committee's approval, tentative approval at today's meeting. Please note that this audit plan is subject to change from now until the first quarter meeting as we begin to have more formal discussions with these auditable units on the plan. It was developed based on higher risk areas and resources available. One of the newer things in the audit plan that you'll see is the very last page. So following this risk assessment report, there is another attachment just for the 2025 draft audit plan. On the last page, you'll see a deferred engagement list. I know in the past that those engagements have been thrown into the audit plan for discussion today, but I wanted to make sure that what we're putting on the audit plan is what we can do. And then the deferred engagements are down below, so that could be up for discussion today at this meeting. Before I get into the audit plan, are there any questions related to the risk assessment report or the risk assessment process?
Could I just ask one question? I compliment you. This is a great process here. Just, I don't want to get too much in the weeds. I can call you to follow up. So you've got weights assigned to all 28 risk factors. So each auditable unit will get something out of, let's say, 5 points. It may get 4 points, and then you just tally up those amounts. Could you, where I got a little bit lost with those quantitative measurements, how do those affect the scoring of the risk factors? I didn't
On
quite.
the actual expenditures and the budget.
Yeah.
Right. Those are added in based on, there is a threshold for each one based on how much weight is added. So
Right.
if, so like actual expenditures, if you're, I'm just going off of a memory. If you have $0 to $500,000 of actual expenditures
Okay.
throughout the year, that's a weight of 0. If you have over 500, you add 1. So those are weighted on based on the dollar amount threshold.
Okay, so you take the score that each auditable unit gets on the 28 risk factors, and then you would add, if I may say, like additional points?
Would add a
if
point,
they have
0.5, right.
a lot of employees. So you're just adding these quantitative points to the risk
Right.
scores? Okay,
Yes.
all right, that's easier than I was
You-
trying to
if
make
you have any
it.
other way, too,
I
I'd
was
love it.
trying to make an issue. Okay. And I was just curious, is it possible for maybe you to send me an email as to what that questionnaire looks like?
Yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
thank you.
And I will say that's part of our process and procedural review next year too, is that questionnaire.
Okay.
There's hopefully some improvements we can make there, as I think some of the questions are a little bit duplicative, and the questionnaire has gotten a lot longer over the years. Yeah, any questions on the risk assessment?
Chairman, do we need to formally approve that?
We could do it, or you want to go through the audit plan, and then we could come back and approve them both? You want to
Yeah,
go through the audit plan?
Yeah,
or
let's
what?
go through the audit plan, then approve them both, just in case there's any questions that come up on the risk assessment again.
Okay.
Okay. The draft 2025 draft audit plan is attached as Exhibit A-8.D. That's included in your attachments after the risk assessment report. That is a 4-page document. So going through the audit plan, the first 2 on the audit plan are audits that we expect to be in progress on January 1st. We will discuss the status of these audits later in the meeting. We are planning to be in the wrap-up phase for at least the CJIS audit, the Criminal Justice Information Systems audit. But at January 1st of '25, there's still some wrap-up that we'll have to do after the report is released. My monthly email did provide a status update on the animal shelter audit, which again, we'll go over and discuss later in this meeting. Planned audits for 2025. These are audit engagements where we provide assurance services on each auditable unit, limited to the audit scope noted and based on inherently higher risk functions within those auditable units. The first audit is on the Sheriff's Office, which has been a high-risk auditable unit on the audit plan for many years now, mostly for publicity in the jail. Jail-specific audits have been deferred on DIA's audit plan over the years. They are deferred this year, other than for corrections activities on overtime for this audit. Due to other audits and oversight on jail operations and jail contracts, we are going to defer some of those jail operations and contract reviews that have been discussed over the last year in this committee. Again, you'll see those deferred engagements on the last page of the audit plan. The Sheriff's Office audit in 2025's audit plan will focus on the overtime process. This has been an emerging risk over the last few years, especially the last few months with ongoing budget concerns. We will assess the effectiveness of the policies, the procedures, and internal controls in place over overtime earned in the Sheriff's Office, including the jail and including law enforcement patrol. If time does allow, there is a objective in here to review with the county strategic plan if available. We'll review the sheriff's performance goals with the county's overall strategic plan as well.
Corey, can you talk a little bit more about exactly what you're doing with the overtime?
Yeah, so we'll go through the process of mostly reviewing approvals, prior approval on overtime, the approval
Only in the on the corrections officer side, or?
on all sheriff's office overtime. The process on patrol, law enforcement, corrections. We did do a review on this years ago. And I mean, I'm aware of what at least they were doing years ago. I would expect there to be improvements in that process, but yeah, prior approval on overtime after it happens, before it goes to payroll. So like all those controls in place and oversight on overtime. And then also the accuracy of the payout of overtime will be part of that.
Are you looking at the causes of overtime?
That'll be part of the prior to, right?
And then with jail operations, you're deferring that because there are external reviews and audits already in progress. Who's doing the external reviews?
I don't know if Mark, if you're better to answer this for me.
There's a number of lawsuits going on right now that are in the process of resolving, not themselves, but being worked out with plaintiff's counsel, that involves an independent monitor that we're agreeing to provide in the jail. And it's just kind of in a state of flux at the moment, and we're trying to get to a steady state where we'd be ready for an audit, but that's at the request of the prosecutor's office to defer until we can make sure that we're at a point where they feel comfortable that this is our proposed standard operating procedures in the jail.
Okay.
To that point, though, you know, one of the issues was to look at the correction side of things, the staffing study. In that staffing study, it refers to the procedures that the state recommends. So you might use that as helpful guidance for your overtime. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. The next audit on the audit plan, the clerk of courts audit was deferred in 2024 and will be included in the 2025 audit plan. Clerk of courts was last audited, for anyone that was here, which probably just is Mike and Trevor at this point, was last audited in 2013 by the Department of Internal Audit. The operations of the clerk of courts office are inherently higher risk due to the legal requirements on court cases and number of financial transactions that do occur on a daily basis. We will be performing an audit on the controls around the collection and remittance of bonds, court costs, and filing fees, as well as enforcement of court actions due to failure to pay court fees. So this is again, another deferred audit from this year's plan that we believe needs to be included in the 2025 audit plan.
If I remember this audit from 2013, lots of high-risk areas identified in the operation of the clerk of courts that we thought they had cleaned up, right? If I'm thinking of that correctly? Okay.
Right.
So are you going back in there is there anything that's causing you to go back in there other than where they stand on the risk assessment?
Where they stand on the risk assessment is the main reason, but also just it's been well over 5 years to perform an audit in that area, and due to the high risk findings that we found back in 2013, we want to make sure that those are still not occurring or they've been addressed. Yes.
Is the same person running the fiscal area in the courts area that was there before?
Some employees are the same, but as far as running the fiscal area, no, not from.
Senior level staff's a little different.
Yeah, senior level, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, page 2 of the planned audits for 2025. So we did include a IT security audit on here as we attempt to address recommendations in the IT risk assessment report from Janus and Associates. We are including an audit on determining the effectiveness of cybersecurity governance, risk management, and control processes. This is also a requirement in the new standards. We were able to use material from the standards and audit procedures and programs from Janus and Associates to perform this audit at a higher level. We have been in discussion with IT on this review, and IT has already assisted with getting us some information to get this engagement started. There are 3 other IT audits included on the deferred list of engagements on the last page of the audit plan. These audits are deferred due to limited IT resources and having expertise to perform those audits. They were taken from Janus and Associates' recommendations from their report, so we'll continue as we go through 2025 to assess our ability to be able to perform these audits and include them on future audit plans going forward. All right. The opioid settlement audit is included on this audit plan for 2025. Again, this was one of the audits that was deferred from 2024. After discussion with the director that's managing the spending of the settlement, the 2025 would be a good year to perform this compliance audit. We plan to review the results of a recent compliance or assessment audit related to the diversion center, which opioid settlement money was used for, and also test compliance with the settlement for other purchase beyond the diversion center.
How much did the county receive, how much did the county receive, and of that amount that the county received, how much of it will be included in what you're auditing? Do you have those numbers? It's probably in the
I
risk
don't have them on mine. Do you have them there, Josh?
And it would be the same question for the ARPA funding.
Yeah, I was gonna look at that too.
Are you only looking at the 24 expenditures, or are you looking at from when we receive the opioid dollars?
Well, we'd like to go back as far as we can if we have time to, on the whole opioid settlement. I mean, the plan here was to do this year, which would have meant if we were looking at prior year, would have been 2023 anyway, or 24, or 22, 23. So, once we get into our planning and make sure we have the resources and time to go back as far as we can, I mean, that's the goal. Pull that up, Josh. It's on here.
Are you, is what's included in the audit plan all of the opioid settlement money, or just a portion of it?
That's what we're talking. I'd like to include as much as we could going back.
But for all I don't know what the money was, but so they got $20 million, and you're gonna, the $20 million is all part of what the scope is in this audit plan, okay.
They spent 13 million last year. Okay, I don't, the total amount they got, I don't know if we have it right here handy.
Okay, but you're focusing on the 13 million that was spent out of it.
That initial big settlement, I think, was about
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where, so the rest of the money's still sitting here with the county?
there's a cash balance of, I think, some of that is encumbered though.
Okay.
Sitting in the fund is about 80. Encumbered for contracts.
Yeah, the cash is being invested.
Okay. So this audit would encompass expenditures for 13 million out of the 107 million that the county received?
No, this would encompass all the 130 if we can go back that far.
That's why I'm confused. So okay, so the county received 130 million, but they've only spent 13 million, and they've encumbered.
They've only spent.
Gave you a calendar year.
They only spent 13 million in 2023.
Oh, okay.
They've spent,
it would be,
I think we spent close to about 45 million.
so it would be the 45 million.
45,
The
okay.
rest is sitting.
Sorry.
Okay.
Audit is
Of the actual expenditures that were paid out of the settlement, right?
Okay.
Okay, good to move on. The final planned audit with the 2025 planned audits was related to the ARPA community grant funds through county council. In 2022, council established an ARPA-based community grant fund for each district. Since then, council has awarded over $63 million of $66 million available to governments and nonprofits in Cuyahoga County for various projects. This program resulted in the high risk rating for county council during the risk assessment. The high rating was due to the dollar amounts of funds awarded during 2023 and the program deviating from normal county processes as the grants went through county council rather than the executive's process, even though I do realize that the county council and staff did follow the executive's processes too through that grant recommendation. So it's similar to, not similar to like economic development grants and loans. This goes through a different process through county council that's, newer to the county that could show some higher risk areas to review. We do plan to perform an audit on each district to ensure compliance with the grant agreement between the county and the recipient. Most importantly, just making sure that the funds were spent on allowable expenses per the agreement. So we plan to perform this audit next year. I do realize the program is still going on, so as we get into it, it might be something that we wait a little bit until some of the contracts or some of the agreements are, the money's actually spent, because I know they're still giving out some of the awards.
All right. So can I ask, so if I understand this one, you're actually going to go out to the entity that received the money from the county. So the right to audit is included in the agreement, right?
These agreements actually specifically have Inspector General and Department of Internal Audit have the right to request records, so we can go out on our own.
Okay.
If we can use that language, that's also another good thing about this audit is it's a good test on the language in the contract to see that are we actually allowed to do this? Which, I mean, it looks like we are.
So the language,
Just what, are you worried that you're gonna get pushback from some of the awardees?
Right.
so the language allows you to do the audit. So you're going to go out to, so recipient A who received the funds for a specific purpose. You're gonna go out to recipient A and say, give me your records that show that these monies were spent appropriately.
Right.
Based upon the agreement. So,
Right.
so the information here isn't here at the county. You have to go out to the potential.
Right, unless they have information, I'd rather get it from the source. Utilize the language in the contracts. I mean, working with council staff as well as we talked about previously. And if we are having any problems, I know I'm talking to you, Trevor, in the application, they have their contact information and everything. So we're planning to, use all that and go ask the questions, get the information that we can to make sure that the awardees are spending the funds in accordance with the agreement.
So aren't these awardees, isn't there some requirement in these contracts for them to report to someone in the county that they're spending the money appropriately? And if that's the case, where does that kind of report play into your audit? Is it
That'll be part of the compliance
ancillary
review.
or look at it first?
That'll be, to answer your question, Keith, that'll be part of the compliance review of the contract too. I do know there's a report that's required to be submitted, I think it's annually, back to council. I'm not sure if that report would include all the details other than maybe just report on, we spent the money and here's a dollar amount we spent. So what we would be asking for is more detail on, show us proof that you actually spent it on that
But
process or project.
you would use that as a roadmap perhaps to
Right.
assist you.
Right.
Okay.
They're required, as Corey indicated, to provide an annual report until the grant is closed on their end, until they expended those funds. Most of the cities because it nonprofits, I would say most of the cities, the projects outside of probably the last couple months that are still being awarded, their projects are closed and they've sent us their final report. Some of the nonprofits take a little bit more time to get some of additional funding, but yeah, they're required to provide an annual report until they consider it closed.
So for me, this is kind of an important step in the continuing evolution of the department, right? Because for the last few years, we've been talking about getting the right to audit language included in all county agreements, because as of 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think that language actually existed in many or any of the county agreements. So again, the audit committee's kind of been encouraging, pushing the evolution of this in regards to county contractual processes, and clearly the county disperses a lot of money to outside organizations. And so to begin having this auditing process being conducted by internal audit, I think is a huge step in the right direction about the continuing evolution of the department. And hopefully at some point in time, you know, the county can get their hands around all of the various organizations that are getting these monies, and either training departments on how to do it, or continuing to increase the staff within internal audit to have this done. My guess would be the results of these audit will probably justify additional staffing in the county, just based upon how people administer or don't administer, you know, county dollars appropriately once they're dispersed to the organization. So good luck on this one.
Thank you.
Be judicious in your selection. Also on this one.
We have sampling methods, Mike. Okay. The final three items here on the annual audit plan are standard processes that we perform annually: the issue tracker, the risk assessment, and the internal assessment process. So those are all standard and have been included in the audit plan for years. The last section of the audit plan includes consulting advisory engagements. These services include advising on the design and implementation of processes, policies, and internal controls, or facilitating discussions on risks and controls. The reports of these engagements will outline results of the services provided and any improvements identified. The first item here on the consulting engagements include continuous monitoring reviews. Similar to the Inspector General's office with their data analytics program, we have identified areas of higher risk for continuous monitoring. Since this is the first year of this program with internal audit, I do plan for hours to develop our audit procedures, which include in the estimated audit effort, and further determine the frequencies of these reviews. You know, initially, some of these we feel like we could do quarterly, or maybe do twice a year, once a year. We will develop these procedures to test the accuracy and controls of these processes during a period of time. For example, in April, we will pull a list of employee reimbursements from the accounting system over the last 3 months and test that support and approvals were obtained. These results will be timely forwarded to appropriate departments if issues are identified. Just to keep the continuous monitoring going, we will release a report to the audit committee at the end of the year. Obviously, if there's any issues found during this process, we will communicate to the audit committee throughout the year. But for time's sake and budgeted hours, we will wait until the end of the year to issue more of a consultant report on this engagement, on our results, what we found, what has been done to correct any issues identified, based on the continuing monitoring efforts that we were able to do during this year. This will also help with increase our coverage on the audit universe as well. I don't know if there's any questions on that process.
Just, I mean, my comment is I think this continuous monitoring review is a great addition to the audit process moving forward, because it's focusing at least some hours on some what could be perceived to be higher risk areas.
Right.
Just because there's always some type of review that the county should be doing in all these areas. So I think this is an important addition to the audit plan for this year.
Okay, the next two items on the consulting services include departmental request on, first one being the Cuyahoga Green Energy, second one being the REDS Revenue Confirmation Review. These were requests again from departments. We are meeting with the Cuyahoga Green Energy team tomorrow to discuss their needs. It's Cuyahoga Green Energy. It is a new energy utility focused entirely for renewable energy. According to their website, they provide clean, reliable, and locally produced energy to customers throughout the development of district microgrids. So this review here, the request at least that came on to us can be more than likely be modified or even come off the plan based on that discussion. So any type of insight we can advise, or we can provide, or any type of recommendations we can provide would have to be solely based on, current processes, policies, and procedures in place and controls. So if there's any additional review they're requesting us to do, we can't assume management responsibility. So we'll see what the request is specifically tomorrow when we meet with them, and I'll keep the committee posted if.
I'm a little confused by this one, I mean, because there really isn't another one in the country, and I'm just
Exactly.
curious what expertise our internal audit department has that apparently no one else has that can help here. That would give up 200+ hours of other things you could be doing.
Right. I imagine this is going to come off a plan based on tomorrow. I feel like if they have some controls in place they want us to look at related to contracts or transactions, or if there's been any financial transactions in place, I assume they're not collecting any cash. But so I just want to get an idea, what the request is, and if there's any areas that we can help in, we would consider. I don't imagine it would take 200 hours at this point, but after tomorrow's meeting, we'll have a better idea. I'll keep the committee updated on that.
Corey, if you do go down that road, I would recommend using the resources at Cleveland Public Power. Cleveland Public Power is a member of American Municipal Power, which is a multi-state organization to buy base load for the communities that are involved. They have a lot of experience with this, and they could probably help.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item, the REDS revenue audit. This really is an extension of our current audit with CGIS, which we'll go over here in a minute. The committee will see the results of that report here in a few weeks. With concerns on total revenue reducing over the last 5 years with the REDS fee, the REDS committee, or the REDS board, and the county's fiscal team and public safety has requested our assistance in performing an audit of the fees dispersed from county courts to the county. The audit will request support from each court over a period of time to identify missing revenues or missing payments. So this is would be more of a revenue confirmation audit that we would develop a report or develop the results and give them to the REDS board and public safety for their review and determination on how they can enforce the requirement for muni courts to pay the REDS fee. It's for anyone that doesn't know, the REDS fee is a $5 on every moving violation ticket throughout the county. The municipal courts collect that $5, or mayor's courts too. And then every month they disperse it to the county to be used on the REDS processes and operations, which could include currently the county license plate readers and the data, I'm going to say data lake, but it's data warehouse used by all the police departments and law enforcement in the county. So through our audit, there is a concern for revenue reducing over the last 5 years, which could be the reduction in tickets, but we want to make sure that the municipal courts are sending in the correct amount based on their records and their systems that they utilize for their court docket system. All right, and then finally, I do have an ethics review on the consulting engagements. I know in past years this has been on the audit plan as an audit of the IG's office. I have placed it as a consulting engagement to perform in coordination with the IG's office, since we would be reviewing any policies, processes with HR and IG. The review is on this plan for really 2 reasons, especially the new auditing standards, to comply with that, and to address a key gap in the 2021 peer review. Standards 9.1 requires our department to consider how the county promotes an ethical culture and must understand how the county identifies and manages key risk areas, including ethics. The audit plan must consider coverage of IT governance and the effectiveness of the organization's compliance and ethics programs. The director, myself should give due considerations to risks related to ethics that may be tied to more than one business unit of process and may require more complex evaluation. So just summarizing this up, we should be reviewing the ethics program for every audit engagement. Since the county executive's office follows one ethics policy administered by the HR through the IG's office, we can satisfy these standards by reviewing the program as a whole with the IG's office and don't need to perform this type of audit or review with each engagement that we do of each department. So I did include it on that, on the audit. I know it's been not included in past years. I will note it, if it's not included in 2025, we just have to document that we're deviating from the standards. And I do realize, since the Inspector General is in charge of the ethics program, that being an independent agency, that might suffice for us not doing an audit of it. But I've talked to Alexa Beeler about this, and it's not, to me, it's not an audit. It'll be more of in coordination with the IG's office to review the ethics policy and make sure that the IG's office or the HR department is doing the annual trainings that's in the ethics policy, that there is a whistleblower hotline, fraud hotline, which I know all of these exist. I don't expect there to be any issues, but then we can document for our peer review and for our standards that we reviewed that process in the policy.
Mr. Chair, on that one, I mean, I know, I've told Corey how I feel on this, and it's just, we have a chief ethics officer. It's an independent agency. I appreciate the peer review, but most entities don't have inspector general. So this one, I think 200 hours can be better served somewhere else instead of reviewing another independent agency that we know is doing their job. I just think this is a waste of 200 hours where the department can better utilize their services.
Yeah, it's so, from my understanding from the standards of the peer review, it was more of it's a review of the ethics policy. From the Inspector General side, from the HR side, make sure it's actually being done. I know PRC annually will request the training logs for all of the annual trainings. So like that right there, we'd be able to check off that that's being done. But there's not a holistic review of the ethics policy and review of the effectiveness of that policy from anyone, unless, the IG has responsibility to do that every single year, because they're the ones who create the ethics policy. They're the ones who would create it, administer it. So it would mainly just be a review on that policy to make sure it's effective and it's working.
So I'm wondering, could the same objective be accomplished if we ask the IG's office to report on the ethics program and their compliance with it, and we receive the report, and then, given that it is an independent department, would that satisfy our peer review? It sounds to me like we're doing this, we sort of know it's okay, but we need to satisfy our professional standards. But maybe we could get them to report to us rather than our have to consult and create our own report. The thought.
So let me just throw out a suggestion on this one, and this is obviously, your guys' decision, but the way it was explained to me today as to why that audit has to get done makes a lot more sense than the way it had been explained historically to the audit committee. We've probably spent 200 hours discussing why it should not get done than the fact that maybe it just should get done. I certainly appreciate all the comments from the audit committee members, but this is done one time. We could then, you guys can just kind of check this off the list and say, we've done it. We're now in full compliance with the standards, but just for purposes of time. So we're only giving you tentative approval now. I guess you have between now and January 31st to maybe get some additional information for the audit committee members and may formally approve it at the next meeting. But it is I get the 200 hours, but I keep hearing that it needs to get done. I better understand now why it has to get done. It's encouraging. I'm assuming Alexa understands why the audit has to get done. And hopefully, between the relationship that's established, you can kind of streamline it just to get it done and get it checked off the list of things that have to get done, but.
As part of the peer review that recommended this, do they acknowledge the Inspector General as the Chief Ethics Officer?
They
I mean,
did not.
they did?
They did not.
Oh, I mean, that's where it's kind of standard recommendations, but we're different. We have an agency of Inspector General. This is what she is responsible for. That's where then who's gonna review internal audit, making sure we're having independent agencies now review independent agencies. Seems redundant and waste of 200 hours.
So maybe that would be the next step, is reach back out to the peer reviewers, make sure they understand that we have and then maybe they'll be willing to adjust their recommendation, or if they better understand it, maybe it won't be a requirement for the peer review. But I think just for the sake of time.
I'll look into what Keith suggested too, to see if there's a recommendation there as well. Okay.
All right. So are you, so just to make sure, the hours that are available from internal audit should allow you to do the first 3 pages of this audit plan,
First 3 pages. Yes.
right? So
Yes.
so when you come back with the audit allocation for the next meeting, you'll be able to see where the I don't know what the workable hours are, or whatever the terminology is, but ultimately align with this audit plan.
Right. It is. It's right. A little over that. It's like 6,300, 6,250.
If there's no more discussion, so I think we need a motion to approve the 2025 risk assessment.
So moved.
Second.
So all in favor of approving the 2025 risk assessment, say aye. Aye. Okay. And then we need a motion I guess it's tentatively approve the 2025 audit plan. At your January meeting is when you formally approve it moving forward, but this is the tentative approval, so internal audit can kind of get started. So we need a motion to give a tentative approval to the 2025 audit plan.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of the tentative approval on the audit plan, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So Corey, we're behind a little bit because we have a hard stop at 11:30, so I'm gonna just jump around a little bit, see what we can get done, and then.
Yeah, I was gonna request to at least get to the status of current engagements and then the last item on the agenda.
Okay.
Or it's up to you.
Yeah, let me get through maybe you can get through some of these items pretty quick. So item E, so the peer review generally requires the Department of Internal Audit to do kind of internal annual assessments of how they're operating, to evaluate internally by themselves whether or not they're ultimately going to be, whether or not they're complying with the standards, which then help pass the upcoming peer review. So this is, right, did I get that correct? Okay. So there's a document here. I don't know if you could spend just a second kind of explaining that to the audit committee, and this is more of an update. There's no approval.
Right, there's no
needed on
approval
this.
or anything.
Okay.
No. This is, as Mr. Boozer all stated, this is a requirement, not only through the peer review process, but also in the internal audit standards to have this internal assessment review performed annually. This internal assessment review, you'll see it in your attachment as A-8.E. This is a review that we've done every year at this time of the prior year, so this is 2023 results, which we'll go through. Josh and team goes through and they document that if we generally conform, partially conform, or do not conform. So for the most part, 2023, overall, we have identified that we generally conform, which is the highest rating you could get in a peer review with the standards in 2023. There were 2 partial conformance, those relate to which will be addressed if the current revisions to the county charter is passed or goes to the voters and is voted on. So those partially conforms relate to the revisions that the committee has already addressed by making revisions to the county charter, or suggesting revisions. So this is this is done annually. Going forward, you'll see this report in the first quarter of the year. We are reporting on 2023 results in the fourth quarter. We've discussed doing this in the first quarter of every year for the prior year, so it's a little bit more timely too. So we're gonna have this for the committee to review in the first quarter of next year, and then going forward, we'll have to obviously update the standards in this form to comply with the new standards.
So I know we don't want to take a lot of time, but can you just elaborate on why we're only partially conforming on independence and objectivity?
This relates to right to having free and unrestricted access to all county records, even though it's in our charter or our bylaws. It's not in the county charter. So that was one of the revisions that the committee has recommended to make.
All right, so that, we're gonna have that until the charter review process, so we're gonna have to live with that for 4 years or
As long as it stays
whatever.
partially and doesn't go to do not conformers.
And the executive order doesn't satisfy it.
Right.
Executive order, okay.
Doesn't.
Okay. Yeah, and my only other suggestion to the audit committee is, and we're not really focused on this necessarily, if you remember, there was a grid that was done after the last peer review that had all the recommendations, and it kind of aligns to this document here. I guess in preparation for the next peer review, at some point in time, you want to allocate some time to that, to a meeting to kind of go through that document to see what can be done prior to the actual peer reviewers coming in.
I have.
Huh?
I've gone through it and documented where we're at. We do have 4 remaining items to address out of there's like 20 of them.
Okay. So I think the whole discussion there would be, spend some time at a meeting, see what those 4 items are, and see if there can't be actions that could be done to ultimately move those from where they're at right now to the conform column. It's been presented historically, we just haven't had any time to allocate it to it. Okay, item F, just another responsibility of the audit committee is to make sure that staff within internal audit are complying with their continuing education requirements. They are, I believe, based upon the document that was provided. Thanks, I think having that document is helpful for the audit committee. So we don't have to formally approve it. I think it just shows that we've performed our step by making sure that the department is monitoring CPE attainment. So questions on that? All right. Item G, so I'm actually just kind of considering these to be more administrative items. I don't think anything requires approval here. So the first one, again, just reminding the audit committee members that hopefully by the first quarter of 2025, you'll have submitted back to the county your independence forms. I don't know if you've sent those out, Corey, but.
I will send them out before the end of the year.
Okay. And ideally, it'd be nice to be able to.
Just as a reminder, I'd requested, when you send it, send the prior year, makes it a lot easier for us to fill them out.
Okay.
Have the 2025 meetings been scheduled?
Yes, that is actually an attachment as well, and I sent out an invite to everyone
Okay.
for next year.
So hopefully everybody has those in their calendars. And then years ago, we developed this, we're calling it the audit committee calendar, which has now been updated. So these are all of the steps that had been determined that we need to do as a committee to make sure that we're fulfilling all of our responsibilities, and we stick them into various meetings. So I don't know if you're gonna pop up that schedule real quick. So it has been updated. I think the biggest potential change to that is kind of the timing of the director evaluation. So I think that suggests getting started much earlier than we have, at least in the last 4 years. And not only having the director complete his self-evaluation, but then also having the audit committee complete the work that you need to do, I think by the second quarter meeting, if I have the right dates in it. Okay. Any other major changes to that you want to talk about?
No, that was the biggest change. We just added the internal assessment and follow-up review or follow-up reports being given to the audit committee by a certain day.
May I ask, how often does this committee meet with the external auditors? is that quarterly or do they do quarterly audits and then kind of present findings, or is that just a year end?
So this audit committee actually has a responsibility for monitoring the external audit process and reviewing the reports, the findings, the entrance conference. So the actual entrance conference for the county is with the audit committee. So that'll be scheduled here by the end of this year. Typically that happens in January, February, and with public records law or public meetings laws that could be executive session or private just because of the revised code. So we'll schedule that at the end of this year, and then you have an exit conference with them, and the fiscal team is also updating the audit committee throughout the year on the process.
How often do we interact with them? Just once a year or quarterly or?
With the actual auditors, the external auditors,
external.
at least twice.
Twice.
The entrance conference and the exit conference at the minimum.
But there is one more important step. So we do ask the internal audit director to be involved with status meetings as the audits are progressing. If there's any red flags that are occurring during the audit process, we ask the director to come back and report that to the committee.
Okay.
We don't have direct interaction with the auditors. We kind of delegate that to the director. He has a direct interaction with the auditors. And if something pops up,
Okay.
we ask him to kind of report the position, report that back up to the committee.
Okay. Because is there any shared auditing responsibility with the external auditors, or do they just kind of have their own plan and do their own?
They have their own plan, but they do ask for our audit reports every year. So if they have a question on an audit, they'll come to us and ask, but there's not been any reliance on our work or any shared responsibilities, mainly because of staffing and internal audit.
Okay, Corey, so we have 10 minutes until we, if there's no other questions, until we have to break. We have to spend time on item K. So what do you want to do for the next 10 minutes?
I'd like to go through the status of the current engagements. The next item on the agenda, the release reports, we can wait until, give a presentation on that in January. We should have some more time. So if we want to move on to the status of current engagements, I'll hand it over to you, Josh.
All right, so you should have been provided with a document. It shows budget versus actual on hours, as well as kind of updates where we are with the entire 2024 audit plan. So the first page is the 2023 carryover audits that came from last year's plan. All 5 of those have been released. 4 of the 5 are closed. 1 has a little bit of wrap-up work that still needs to be done. That should be definitely done by year end. Okay. Second page was the 2024 planned audits. Just in the interest of time, I'll kind of hit the few that are still applicable, the ones that basically didn't get deferred. Microfilm, that engagement, the report was released on 12/2. So you should have gotten that recently. Criminal Justice Information System. So we had an exit conference tentatively scheduled for this Friday. However, one of the findings, there's 4 findings. One of them, we just need some confirmation and assistance, I think, from the fiscal office just to make sure that we have things right. Unfortunately, Lee and Lennon are both out this week, and they're kind of our point people for that. So there might end up being a shorter delay just because of the time requirements for reporting. We give the auditees 2 weeks with the report, and then we give it to the committee for 2 weeks. So we're still hoping for year end on that one, though. Animal shelter, we are expecting a couple week delay, so we're anticipating that we'll actually get the report to the committee in mid-January. Reasons for that is there is a lot more compliance work than we thought with animal shelters, given the veterinarian aspect of it. There's actually, we found 10 processes involved that included 12 laws and 54 applicable requirements to comply with. So just the testing and planning for that has been kind of time consuming. Additionally, we also, there's been some new processes implemented since the last time they were audited over cash collections. So it took a little bit longer to gain an understanding of those updates, as well as there was a slight delay in the start due to prior engagement carryover. And throwing in there the fact that we've assigned the new auditor, Tiana. She's been helping on that engagement. So there's some training aspect in there as well. But that shouldn't be more than mid-January. Then skipping down to actually number 11, that's our issue tracker.
But Josh, just, are we 610 hours over our budgeted hours? Is that right on that line? Did I read that correctly? You were scrolling.
Which
I just-
one?
That's actually under
Oh,
budget, scheduled budget hours for the whole year. Earl and the
yeah, that,
vacancy.
the first column in that section is basically what we initially scheduled. So if that makes sense. So it's based on audit resources. So, and then,
So I guess if we were fully staffed though, would we be, is it taking us longer to conduct the audits? I guess is a better way to ask. You know what I mean? Like we have, like here, right? Most of those we're over our hours on engagements, right? That's, what's that total of that released over under? Are we 700 hours over, I guess, for the audits that we had planned?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, plus the deferrals. These we're actually 1,000 hours of deferred hours, and we're still over budget.
Okay.
oh, no, you're talking about this?
Yeah.
This is
you're talking about
actually,
655, right?
the 665 is
sorry,
actually under, is under.
But for the audits that we're actually conducting, it's taking us just longer than we originally budgeted based
Get
off that.
through
right?
it. It's,
Okay.
well, I
Alright,
mean,
that's-
it's kind of based on the 60% utilization rate. So we took everybody's hours, 2080 per year, times the 5 people that are factored in there, multiplied it by 0.6, so that gives us 6240. So that gives us the bottom of that first column. 4,999 hours are what we've actually spent on this year on engagements. The 576 is kind of looking at how much time we have left in the year and how much audit effort we anticipate to be spending. So that gets us to 5,575 hours actually spent working on engagements in 2024. So that puts us actually under budget by 665. Now, part of that reason is because we had a vacancy for about 4 months, so that actually drops our total, available resources down, as well as our overall resource utilization. Even though we target for 60, it's been coming in at like 58 or 59.
So I think what would be helpful, and it's probably, I'm sure it can be teased out of here, I just didn't take the time to do it. If you could report to us on completed engagements, what the over or under is, that would take the timing considerations, the under staffing out.
Yeah.
And we'd just be able to, as
To
a
look at-
performance metric, we would know we're, completing audits within 5% of budget, 10, whatever.
Gotcha. So completed engagements
Just,
only.
yeah, I
conversion.
mean, in the future. Thank you.
Yes, supplemental. That would be good.
Okay, isn't that already on this report, though? Isn't what Keith just asked already on this report?
We're on there, but it's not summarized.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's-
I'd like to
Looking
just
for-
sign
Oh,
it.
it would
be,
okay.
the date is here.
This is the long version, so to speak, yes.
And it's fair to say that those, by deferring those audits, those hours that were supposed to be allocated to the audits were needed for the implementation of the standards
And the
That's part,
vacancy.
yeah.
and the vacancy. But that's kind of, so when you look at that number, it's that's why the audits had to be deferred, because they had to allocate more time to implement the standards, I believe. I don't want to speak for the department, but, okay. Okay, all right, so let's jump to item K, the chairperson appointment. So the committee needs to appoint I don't know the terminology of the interim chair, I guess might be the right terminology, to fulfill the role between January 1st and your first meeting, which I think is at the end of January of 2025. And then at the first meeting in the first meeting at the January 2025 meeting is when I think you have to kind of go through the same process to appoint the chair for the remainder of 2025. if I have that right. So I think the process is nominations and then motions to approve and then an approval process. So we need you to recommend a potential chair for the, I guess it's for the first month of 2025.
Mr. Chairman, just based on tenure, I'd recommend Keith Libman, if he's willing to accept.
Everybody else steps back. I'll still be standing.
Yes.
Any other nominations? He's the right person, by the way, but any other not that you all couldn't do it, but based upon his age and his tenure, vote. So, and willingness, and capability. Let me put all the adjectives in there
At
that
least we know the order.
go along with it, yeah. So, any other nominations for the interim chairperson position? Okay, so we need a motion to approve Keith as the interim chair for for the first month of 2025.
So moved.
Second.
So all in favor of approving Keith Libben for the position of interim chairperson for 2025, say aye.
Aye.
All right, perfect.
I'll abstain.
Okay, so we do have 3 minutes. Is there anything else you want to report? Can you do anything else in 3 minutes, or should we just go to executive? Huh?
That's never happened.
Okay. So, but we're going to go into executive session, right, at 11:30? Is there anybody else that's going to come into executive session?
Yeah, I expect.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we're going to have much time after the executive session, but I would like to say I appreciate your leadership. You've been great the entire time I've been on this committee, and I appreciate your insight. What you bring to the table is truly amazing, and not just your technical and audit knowledge, but how you manage the meeting. So I very much appreciate all you've done for us. Thank you.
You are the new governmental finance expert on well, you've always been, but you're the only remaining governmental finance. But thank you, I appreciate the comment. So do we want to go to executive session now?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so I'm jumping back to the agenda. Back to item 6. So all meetings of the Cuyahoga County Audit Committee are open to the public under the Ohio Open Meetings Act. However, the committee may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, the committee confers outside of the hearing of the public, but may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All final decisions are made in public. So the committee will go into executive session for the purpose of considering a complaint against a public official and confer with outside counsel concerning a dispute, which is subject to imminent court action. So, we don't need a motion, or do we need a motion? Motion and roll call. Okay, so we need a motion to go into executive session for that purpose.
So moved.
Second.
So all in favor, now we need the roll call? Okay, so now we need a roll call.
Okay, calling roll. Michael Abuzarol,
Yes?
Trevor McLear,
Yes.
Keith Libman,
Yes.
Meltree Sharp, Salvador Tellerico.
Yes.
Okay, so if I can ask everybody, well, the only people I want in executive session are the currently existing audit committee members